What's up? It is Plugged On. It's Keith, and I'm here for another TV review. It's been a little while since we've done one of these. I think since The Punisher, which is very fitting because we're going to review the new season of Marvel and Netflix's Jessica Jones. This is the second season of the show, and it is a follow-up to Jessica Jones Season 1 and The Defenders. A little bit, but we'll get back to... But I'll get to that, my opinions on that, in a second. So, the season... There's going to be spoilers ahead, so full warning, it's kind of harder to talk in depth about all these things without getting into spoilers. So, that's how we're going to do this. But, so, the season is basically about Jessica confronting her past and the accident and how she got her powers and moving forward with her life, which is kind of a big thing about overcoming her own personal demons and things like that. So, in the very beginning of the series, Jessica's back to her old trick. She's helping people, but she's kind of having to balance being a person and being considered a powered person and a vigilante. You know, in which that's something that Marvel's Netflix stuff does a little bit better. Is they take time to reflect that, hey, there is powered people in the world, which is something that in a 2-hour movie Marvel doesn't really have time to do. So at least in this Netflix stuff, you can at least, you know, they make reference like, oh yeah, you're a powered person, you have superpowers, whatever. So while all this is going on, you know, Malcolm is still working for her, but Trish is still trying to hunt IGH. She wants to answers on what they did to Simpson from last season and what they did to Jessica, but Jessica's not having any of it. She just wants to move on. And Trish repeatedly is poking the bear, and you know, she's not letting her move on. And, you know, while all of this is going on, Trish is dating this guy named Griffin Sinclair, who is a popular news reporter that she kind of is constantly feeling not underappreciated per se, but like inferior, which becomes a big part of her story arc. And then also, while two other things are happening while this is going on, you have, well, a couple other things. You have another private investigator named Price Chang, who is coming in to try to absorb Alias investigations, and he's kind of resorting to some like dirty tricks to get Jessica. And it turns out he's working for Hogarth, who wants Jessica to work for her, but her plans and whatnot become complicated because she becomes diagnosed with ALS. And again, still, while all this is going, Jessica at least initially has troubles with her super in her apartment complex named Oscar. And even though, in which their relationship eventually grows, eventually. So, she meets a person who goes by the name of the Wizard, who is a powered person like herself. And then eventually he dies in a suspicious accident that she realizes is from a super person. And so she's going to the IGH place and she's finding out. And then she finds out that Simpson is still alive, and she reckons that Simpson is responsible. You know, and while this is going on, Trish is still trying to figure out about IGH, and she ends up going back to an old director that she used to work with, and turns out that they had an illegal relationship when she was 15, and you know, he's an older gentleman, so it was illegal and whatnot. But eventually, you know, they both run into Simpson, but it turns out Simpson is trying to protect Trish and Jessica from the real killer, and then the killer shows up and kills Simpson. This all happens within the first 2 episodes. So they eventually find out that this powered person who's around killing people is a woman, and they track her, and they manage to connect her to a doctor, Dr. Carl Malice, who is one of the doctors who performed the experiments that gave Jessica and everybody else their powers. And then they managed to track him through use of like a nurse named Inez Green, who's homeless, who was attacked by this powered person. And then as the events go on, it becomes apparent when you find out that this powered woman that everybody that she keeps running into is Jessica's mom, Elisa, who was also saved from the car crash. So, and then a really cool flashback episode is shown at that point, where it shows Alyssa's, you know, recovery from after the accident, to her wanting to see her daughter, eventually breaking out of IGH to go see her daughter, where she ends up kind of being around Jessica when she has when she has her boyfriend, what's his name? What's the dude's? I'm trying to find his name. Oh, why is it not in here? Well, she ends up with her boyfriend, and Trish is a young pop star who's battling with addiction and whatnot. But Alyssa thinks that Jessica's boyfriend is using her, and she ends up killing him in her blind rage, because part of her thing is she can't control her rage, and that's kind of the starting point for a lot of Jessica's backstory. So eventually Jessica ends up spending a lot of time with her mom while the Carl goes off to try to hide, and they eventually get closer until eventually, seeing the kind of monster that she is, Alyssa turns herself over to the authorities. You know, as this is going on, Trish enlists the help of Malcolm, who she seduces twice, to kind of help her find Carl, because she doesn't think that Jessica's thinking clearly, that she can't see how much of a monster her mom is, and so she's not willing to let Carl off the hook. And while all this is going on, she had found like an inhaler that had the combat enhancement that Simpson used, and she was using this all season, and it makes her feel, better. And it becomes apparent that she's like addicted to it to some extent, in which that's kind of, and then it kind of strains her and Malcolm's relationship, because he finds out and he's a recovering drug addict. This eventually leads to a couple things. So first off, Jessica and Malcolm do track Carl, but at the same time, Jessica's investigating a prison guard who is tormenting her mother and accidentally kills her, and accidentally kills the prison guard, and then covers up the death. Thus, and then she starts hallucinating, seeing Kilgrave, who's, like the manifestation of the monster, the perceived monster inside her. She eventually overcomes this right around the time that Trish abducts Dr. Malice and asks him to perform the surgery that gave Jessica her powers on her, because she's tired of feeling helpless, and it kind of comes into her whole she never feels like she's enough thing. I mean, she, over the course of the season, her boyfriend at the time, Griffin Sinclair, he proposes to her, which she rejects because she doesn't want to be with him. She wants to be him. She wants to be that hard news reporter. But then she quits her radio show and then bombs a TV audition to be a TV anchor. So she's in a bad place. And the surgery leaves her critically injured, so Jessica takes her to the hospital. And while there, and then so she's in like a coma for a little while. And then when Jessica goes to rescue her, Carl kills himself because he realizes, what I've been doing is bad, and he kills himself. But Alyssa blames Trish. So Alyssa breaks out of jail or prison, and then she goes to try to kill Trish, but she's convinced not to by Jessica. And then the two run off together, or the two, Alyssa kidnaps Jessica, and it takes her because they're both going to flee. And Jessica's like, okay, because in this case, her mom just gets angry. Her mom doesn't mean to be a villain, but at the same time, she gets angry and very protective, and then she'll hyper focus on whatever the perceived danger is. So that's why she killed a bunch of people, is that she doesn't want. Well, she was protecting Carl, and then eventually becomes she's protecting Jessica. And Jessica sees this, and she's like, okay, I don't want you to die, so they plan to flee to Canada. But they end up at Playland, which is where Jessica and their family were planning on going. I believe, I could be mistaken on this, but that seems to be the place where they were heading when they were going on their vacation when the accident happens. And then they have like a nice moment on the Ferris wheel where Alyssa tells Jessica to run because she doesn't want her to die. And then she's shot by Trish, shoots her right in the head. And Jessica is angry and then tells Trish to run, but then takes the blame for killing her mother herself. And so then we're kind of in this weird place because it's very down yet at the same time hopeful end of the season. Trish and Jessica aren't speaking because Jessica blames Trish, and she says, I only see the person who killed my mother when I look at you. Jessica and Malcolm had a falling out because Malcolm went behind her back and helped Trish, and then Trish and Malcolm are falling out because Trish has shown that she had been just using Malcolm a lot. So all three of these characters, their relationships aren't in a great place. But there's like silver linings. But there are a few silver linings. Malcolm ends up going to work for Chang because he wants to get his stuff used, and he helps Hogarth get dirt on her business partner so that she can start her own firm. Trish, turns out maybe she did get power. She has like faster reflexes, and in the comics she is Hellcat, the hero Hellcat, so who knows, maybe in the future she'll become a vigilante hero. Hogarth, during the whole thing, Hogarth had kind of thought that she had found a person from IGH who could cure her ALS, but turns out it was a hoax, so the two of them could rob Hogarth, and Hogarth manages to manipulate Inez to kill this guy, to kill the dude who acts like he can heal her. So she gets her revenge, and then again she gets her help. And Jessica, she finds a surrogate family. Her super in her apartment, Oscar, him and her basically end up getting in a relationship, and she becomes close to him and his son Vito. And then the series ends with them having dinner together in Oscar's apartment. So there's some hopeful stuff, but it's definitely a different place. So that's a rough recap. It's kind of bounced all over the place. I'm sorry, but for the most part, I love this season. I love how personal it gets. It gets even more personal somehow than Kilgrave, which, you see Kilgrave, he was this person who manipulated and used Jessica and made her feel dirty. But now you see, like, you kind of take this thing with Jessica's mom, which brings up the question of, like, is there more of an expectation of people with superpowers to do the right thing than normal people? Like, if you were asked, hey, your mom is a murderer, would you kill your own mom? And it's like, and it's a difficult question to answer, and I think that's a very hard dichotomy. But all the characters get into a super interesting place. All of Trish, Malcolm, and Jessica all have like these inferiority complexes where they feel like they need to prove themselves, and it all comes to a head in certain spots. I mean, that's basically everything that happens to Trish. I mean, her drug addiction, her breakup with Griffin, and then her eventually wanting powers is because she needs to feel better about herself. And then Malcolm, he's constantly trying to help Jessica and try to help people with the whole private eye thing because he needs something to do because he's an addict and he wants to feel better about himself. And the same thing with Jessica. Jessica's blamed herself for the car accident for years and also all kinds of other things. And at least her story gets a little bit of resolution because she ends up uttering the words to the Kilgrave hallucination, I'm enough, which is a huge step for her character. So, I mean, there's a lot of parallels too. I like the parallel between Oscar, Vito, and Vito's mom, because Oscar and the mother are getting a divorce, and so there's a lot of things of not wanting to take away Vito's mother, which is purposefully done as a parallel to Jessica and her own mom, and that's super, and that was super well done, and also just a lot of the visual cues, like the first time that Jessica and Oscar have sex, he's a painter, and they knock over paint, and it's purple and yellow, representing, Luke Cage and Kilgrave as their two main colors, which is super interesting. But, I really like it. This gets so personal, and it's not a typical villain versus hero story. It's a very personal story for Jessica about her family, and she eventually, at the end of the series, realizes that even though her family was dead, she was dead for years. Now she's trying to not be that. I mean, she's rebuilding her life with Oscar and Vito. And sure, she lost Trish and Malcolm, but I would assume that maybe they'll probably, if/when season 3 happens, that they'll probably all come back together and they'll make up. But I just like it because, it's a not your typical happy ending. The one problem I do kind of have with this season is, and it's something that it's the Avengers problem, which is after the first Avengers movie happens, you kind of start thinking, especially with like a lot of these big catastrophes, like in the Winter Soldier, or when the president gets kidnapped in Iron Man 3, or any of the big problems that happens after the first Avengers movie. You start to wonder, well, why aren't all the Avengers called in for this? And it kind of happens with this, whereas the first wave of these Netflix shows, there's usual like there's a plausible reason why none of the other characters are around during the events. But now, like, maybe despite the Punisher, who's at least currently done with seeking his vengeance, and Daredevil, who's off somewhere, like, in a critical condition, like, why don't Luke Cage and Iron Fist show up? Why isn't there more connectivity? You know, Turk shows up for a little bit, and Foggy shows up for a little bit, and there's, like, a very small references to the Defenders, but, like, I get it, but, like, there should be, like, I think that there should be a little bit more connectivity. Because, and Jessica Jones Season 1 did it perfectly. Luke Cage was a part of the season, but only in his he was only important in his interactions with Jessica. Like, you can do that with other characters. Like, bring in, probably Iron Fist, bring in Danny Rand. He makes the most sense, and bring him in and do that. But yeah, so I really liked the episode. I thought the episode with Kilgrave was really good. It had a very Arkham Knight vibe to it, because he's just kind of talking to Jessica, and he's just a hallucination appearing everywhere. And I mean, David Tennant's a fantastic actor, and I mean, sure, they kind of manipulated the plot of the show to bring him back specifically. Like, that's really the only reason that the whole subplot with the prison guard happens. But I think the payoff of that episode was really good. I just wish maybe they could have set that up a little bit better. But yeah, like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed Jessica Jones Season 2. You should definitely watch it. You know, they announced that Luke Cage is coming back in June, so that'll be cool. And then who knows what's coming after that. I hope that Marvel can keep it up. I mean, The Punisher and Jessica Jones Season 2 are two of the best stuff that they've ever done. So yeah, thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out any other reviews. Sometime towards the end of the month, or at least I will be doing the series of unfortunate events when that comes out. So definitely check that out. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I shall talk to you guys later.